This is DawgNation Gameday, brought to you by Kroger, R.S. Andrews, UGA Bookstore, Sir Chero's, J. Stein Law Firm, and Jittery Joe's Coffee. Here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
Hello, Dog Nation, and welcome to the DawgNation Gameday Show. I'm your host, Kaylee Mansell, and today we are coming in live from the DawgNation headquarters, World Studio, whatever you want to call it. We are so happy to be here today on another terrific game day. It's an early one today for all of you that decided to head to Nashville. We've got some DawgNation members there. They're going to join us later today. Tell us the vibe, what we can expect from today's game. One theme that we've been seeing throughout DawgNation this entire month is it's Brocktober. I don't know if you can see my jersey. I'm so excited to be able to wear this. Y'all know for game day I have to dress up a little bit, which is never my first choice, but I'm excited. I've got my Brock jersey on, and the funny part about it is I've had this sitting in my closet since January. I was supposed to wear it for my first ever national championship appearance, but when you order things from Singapore, they just don't come in on the time that they're supposed to, so I broke it out today. Feels like the right time. Expecting big numbers for Brock Bowers today. Let's go ahead and start taking a look at what we can expect from today's game with Vanderbilt. Now, guys, this is a big game for us, not necessarily because of the opponent, but because after this we go into bye week, and as we saw with the Braves, we know what happens when you take a week off, or we see the potential that can cause. So today for the Dogs is really all about keeping that consistency that we saw in Kentucky and seeing how much we can establish our offensive identity. I would like to see us put up some big numbers today. That way we have a little bit of momentum heading into bye week, because as you all know, it doesn't get easier after this. It's only going to get more difficult. This is the last game that we kind of have to establish that identity, figure out what our purpose is here, and there's no better opponent to do it than against Vanderbilt. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we can expect out of today's game with them. This will be our 83rd time facing off versus Vanderbilt, and the last time that we will face them annually, which is a good thing for the Commodores, I guess you could say. All-time record, 60-20, not even close. And in our 2022 meeting, UGA won 55-0. We've beat them 5 times in a row. I believe the last time that we lost to the Commodores was back in 2017. It was a close game. We lost 17-16, which was in Kirby's first or second year of being with the Dogs. And on the 2023 season, Vanderbilt just 2-5. Now, keep in mind, last year Vanderbilt had a lot of momentum headed their way. They looked really good. They had some big wins over Kentucky as well as Florida, and they're coached by head coach Clark Lee, who's in his 3rd year with the Commodores. And since the performance that he put on last year, he got his contract extended to 2029. And Vanderbilt, when we take a look at them this year, they're clearly not the same team that they were last year, but they are excelling in one particular area, which is special teams. They are leading the NCAA in net punting, which is total yard per punt minus yards per punt, which puts them atop the NCAA. Now, this stat really shouldn't make all that big of a difference in today's game, but if Vandy wants to keep the game even semi-close, they're going to have to win in the field position game and make major moves on the special teams end. Now, Georgia native A.J. Swan out of Cherokee High School. He's a sophomore. He had a great freshman season at Vanderbilt, and he was the starter for the first few games until he threw 6 interceptions in 3 games. So Clark Lee decided to make the decision that he was going to bring in a veteran quarterback in Ken Seals, who is no rookie to the SEC. He is a senior. He has played in 22 games and started 18 of them. They've seen a difference since they brought him in. In Kirby Smart's press conference that he had on Monday with the media, he actually addressed his respect for Seals, what the wide receiver groups from Vanderbilt can do, and gave us an idea of what he expects from them. So let's take a listen to Kirby on Vanderbilt.
Yeah, it stands out. They have speed at receiver. They have really good wideouts. I didn't realize, unless I was watching all the games yesterday, how fast they are at wideout. And the quarterback's done a great job getting them the ball. They've had some injuries up front and had some guys going in and out on the offensive line. But, he buys more time. He's mobile. He's able to highlight the players they have. They have really good wide receivers, and he buys time to make throws, off-platform throws, scramble throws. He's got a really good arm, and he's a good athlete. So when he extends a play, it brings their what the strength of their team is up, because he gives them more time to make plays.
Vanderbilt offense. Like you said, Ken Sales, he's a guy, he's experienced. He extends plays for that Vanderbilt team. I think there are over 3 receivers with 500-plus yards. So we're going to see Vanderbilt in the passing game today especially, which is going to be huge for our DBs, because we saw them exploited a little bit in the Auburn game. And so this is a really good way to capitalize on our potential on the DB side and really get that tight coverage, because we know moving forward, as I said, it's not going to get easier. If anything, it's only going to get more difficult. So we really have to take today and find a way to answer all those questions and close all of those gaps as we head into the rest of the season. Now, here's what we're going to do. So in just a little bit, we're going to have Brandon Adams on, who was on site today at Vanderbilt. We have to give a major shout out to Brandon, because he was on the high school football call last night with us, and he drove halfway to Chattanooga last night, finished it off in Nashville this morning. I don't think there's anybody else in the field that can do it like Brandon Adams does. So we have to make sure that we give him a shout out today. And one thing I want you guys to be thinking about is in the comments, go ahead and get your questions ready. I want to pull some of y'all's questions for Brandon. I've got the opportunity to do that today, so I really want to take y'all's comments into account. And then later on in the show, we're going to have Mike Griffith. We're going to get his last word. So go ahead and start thinking about your questions for Mike Griffith as well. Really want to utilize you guys this week, since we have the opportunity to do so in the DawgNation World Headquarters studio. I think I say it different every single time, but it has a nice ring to it. And then, of course, your favorite guy, Jeff Sentell, with our usual recruiting report. We're going to have him. We won't be able to get any questions because we always pre-record with Jeff, but we got some really interesting stuff for you guys, a little bit more on what's to come with injuries, and then we're going to do Kaylee's Keys and Impact. I know last week I threw you guys off with the order of the show. I'm going to do the same thing this week. I'm going to keep you on your toes, but we should have Brandon Adams coming on at any point. So one thing that we were looking at on social media earlier is, obviously, as a lot of you know, Vanderbilt is under construction at the moment, and so the accommodations aren't necessarily what they would be for the Dogs. I believe that their locker room is a tent today. There's going to be a lot of noise in that stadium from all of the construction that's still going on, and it's hard to bring in recruits for either side when you've got things like that. And it's a little bit on the colder side. I believe this will be the first chilly game that the Dogs have played all season long. Can that potentially have an impact on their play? But considering that Vanderbilt has not scored a touchdown on the Dogs since 2018, I don't really see that being an issue. They kicked 2 field goals over the last 5 years. Now, we didn't play them in 2020 due to COVID. There was a little bit of bad blood between our two programs as a result of that. But really, today is all about having fun, seeing our favorite players make big plays, put up big numbers. We are constantly watching the Dogs move up and up in the rankings for offensive stats. And so I think today is a way to continue to do that. We'd like to see Carson Beck throw the ball more. I'd like to see him make big plays. I want to see him go yard. But also, too, with a game like Vanderbilt, this is the perfect opportunity for us to see some of those younger guys that we've only gotten a glimpse of so far. Like, I'd like to see more of Raylan Wilson and guys like that, just because this is the time that we get to see those players that are going to take over next year and the year after really shine in games like this. And even last week we got the chance to see Brock Vandergrift come in at the end of the game, and every time that he's come into the game, it doesn't matter if it's just for a minute or two, the impact that he makes, the fan base is so receptive to that. Everybody loves the hometown kid. I mean, who can blame you? And I would like to see Gunnar Stockton today as well. He's a guy that kind of flies under the radar just because he is behind 2 highly rated quarterbacks. But man, guys, I saw Gunnar Stockton when he was at Raven County for his senior year. The guy has got an arm, and he's going to be one to look out for. So I'd really love to see him get some playing time today, get some eyes on him. I really think that's a guy that is going to stick this out Now, we're going to have Brandon Adams on here soon. So go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and pull up YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and start looking at your questions, getting it ready, because I want to hear from all of you out there today. And I also want to give a shout out in the meantime. I love being here at the DawgNation headquarters studio, but I'm missing my Jittery Joes this morning. A little tired. I needed that little pick-me-up, but I know that they are watching and supporting us. And so want to give a shout out to them, and we will be back there for the next home game, which, wow, we've got a while to the next one, but I did have my Jittery Joe's K-Cups this morning, so I've got a little bit of a boost in me. Trying to pull up your comments, guys, so that way whenever we have Brandon come on, William Camacho says, I say Brocktober Bowers will have 174 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. I think that's a pretty good prediction, William. I would love to see him have a 200-yard game. That might be a lot to ask for, but I feel like if there's going to be a day to do it, it's going to be today's game. A lot of wiggle room. Ian Russell says his son just brought him a Muse jersey. Wow, that you might be one of the first ones to get one. Muse, another player that has continued to impress us. He's really made such a difference in our overall game. We haven't really been that successful on the special teams in recent years. We haven't had a guy like Isaiah McKenzie, but I can hear noise in the background. That means it is time to bring on everybody's favorite host, Brandon Adams. Brandon, how are you?
I am doing great. We're here in Nashville. I'm actually standing on the field right now where it's really pretty sunny, although a little cooler than probably any kickoff thus far this season. Georgia literally arrived about a couple of minutes ago, just getting here. Very unusual setup. The stadium is in a complete state of disarray. Both end zones, totally torn up, totally wrecked by construction. And that means for Georgia today, they'll be dressing what essentially amounts to a tent. Now, it's a nicer tent, probably a little bit more like glamping than camping, if you get my drift. But they're in their tent right now getting dressed as if, this was the circus. And we saw Kirby Smart on the field a moment ago being interviewed by CBS. So that's kind of the scene here. Good number of Georgia fans right now. Always a healthy bunch that travel over to Nashville. Many of them probably very little sleep after being on Broadway last night. But a good number of Georgia fans already here, creating to this atmosphere here in Nashville right now.
And I'm glad you're talking about atmosphere. I know you got the chance to walk around the streets of Nashville for a little bit. Are the dogs out today? How much of the fan base is out? And what are the vibes like in the air, Brandon?
Well, I love the good number of Georgia fans that gathered here for what was kind of a makeshift dog walk. And I had a lot of folks reach out to me and say, well, how do you get there to that? A little bit of a hard way to describe that right now just because of how much construction. I cannot overstate that. The stadium pretty much, and the entire area around the stadium pretty much overtaken by construction. But a good number of Georgia fans kind of found their way there, and you've already got a good number kind of milling about. As I'm talking to you, I see Kirby Smart kind of taking a lap around the stadium here right now, the field, and just kind of getting acclimated to the environment and perhaps burning off a little bit of that extra energy prior to this game time. But we've already seen a lot of Georgia fans here today, so the expectation is, much like the last couple of times Georgia's been here, it's going to be as close to a home game environment for UGA as playing on the road possibly provides.
And Alex Lundeen from YouTube has a great question that he wanted to ask you specifically. He said, with Vanderbilt Stadium being under construction, does it feel like a high school environment, and do you think that UGA could potentially start slow as a result of this, or do they bring their own juice and start quick?
Well, it definitely feels more like, and I don't mean to be, overly dismissive, but it definitely feels more like a high school environment than probably any other stadium that Georgia's ever going to play in. However, I do think that if you want to compare this to, like, say, 20 years ago when you maybe have played in an early start game in Nashville, perhaps that might have felt a little sleepier. The truth is, in the last 10 to 15 years, Nashville's become such a destination town, weekend getaway type thing, that's motivated so many Georgia fans to be here and be a part of this that actually I don't think that Georgia fans, or I should say that the Georgia team, is going to be lacking for too much juice in the stadium just simply because so many of their own fans are going to help them provide that there today. Now, does Georgia get off to a slow start? That's probably a separate question because we've seen Georgia do that a couple of times already this year, but I don't think if that happens, it'll be attributed to the environment. The other thing to keep in mind here, too, is that while at one point in time, maybe you might be on guard for something like that, the truth is the last 2 years against Vanderbilt, Georgia's dominated them as much as anybody, outscoring them by a combined total of more than 100 points. Vanderbilt hasn't scored in either of the last two games, hasn't scored a touchdown against Georgia, I think, since going back to 2018?
2018,
I guess you have to go
yes,
back
sir.
to find the last time that Vanderbilt scored a touchdown against UGA. So whether it's the motivation that comes from the environment of UGA fans or just that intrinsic motivation that Kirby Smart says he likes so much, my guess is there'll be plenty of it for Georgia here today.
And as this is our last game before we head into the bye week, I mentioned on the show earlier that this is kind of the point in our season where we wrap up the first half, we go to bye week, we come back, and it is like pedal to the metal. This is the easiest it's going to get at this point in the season. What do you think the Dogs need to do today before we head into that bye week? What identity would you like to see established from the Dogs?
Well, I think obviously the most important thing here is knowing you've got the extra week to rest. Looking ahead to next Saturday, is you want to get out of here no worse for the wear injury-wise than you are right now. I think that Georgia probably craves that week off, at least in terms of game action. I think they're certainly looking forward to being rested up on that, and hopefully nobody today comes out with any kind of injury. Obviously, you want to see Georgia kind of maintain the rhythm that it's been in. It played its most impressive game of the season last week against Kentucky, so the idea that you would keep that momentum going here is obviously something that a lot of Georgia fans would like. A lot of times going into off weeks, that hasn't always been the best of Georgia. It was a year ago against Vanderbilt. As we said before, that was a blowout, shutout win. But Georgia's actually lost twice outright in the Kirby Smart era in that week before the off week, and only 1-8 against the spread in those instances as well, dating back to Smart's first year here in 2016. So this hasn't always been an automatic spot for the kind of easy Georgia win, the week prior to an off week. But pretty clearly, Georgia knows it's got its most important stretch of the regular season coming up on the other side of this bye with Florida and Missouri. And obviously we'll be watching both those teams closely today and kind of showdown-type games just to see how much cachet they bring into their game against UGA. Then two ranked opponents after that with Ole Miss and Tennessee. So I think for Georgia fans, you hope to see as much of last week's success replicated as possible, but ultimately you know that the real story for Georgia is going to be told by what happens in the weeks to come.
Mm-hmm. And the UGA fan base has big expectations for the Dogs in today's game, put up big numbers. Do you think that in the case that UGA goes up big in the first half, do you think that Kirby tries to run the score up, or do you think that he's going to let some younger guys have some big opportunities?
Well, I definitely think there's a certain human nature that takes over sometimes, and I think this team heard a lot, whether it was overblown or a real concern or what. One way or another, they heard a lot about the idea of getting off to slow starts and not having, crisp offensive play, especially in the first quarters of games, opening drives of games. And at one point, I think you saw Georgia get pretty tired of that narrative and seem very intent on ending that. So I'm imagining some of the residue is still left over from that, where they pretty clearly want to get off to a better offensive start. And we also heard a lot this week about, Kirby kind of using some positive reinforcement and some, a little bit more of a kinder, gentler version of Kirby in terms of how he coached up his defense after the letdown against Auburn. Well, that seemed to work because last week Georgia played a much better defensive effort against probably a better rushing attack overall than what they'd struggled with against Auburn. So maybe there's also that desire to see that, kind of validated and reinforced, that whatever wavelength they're on, they preach about the connection and having that unity with each other, that whatever wavelength they've been on, that the best way to make sure that stays strong through an off week coming up is to make sure you kind of go out on a high note today. So there's no doubt that Georgia wants to play a good, sound football game today and get the convincing victory. And by the way, the quicker you get up, the more convincing it is, the earlier that takes place, the more you get a chance to perhaps see more of Brock Vandagriff, if that indeed is in the cards, or see more of these young players who can use actual game experience as a way of continuing the development process. Clearly, that's one of the things that, while Georgia coaches can't talk about that publicly, pretty clearly that's on their minds privately. And clearly for fans, that's one of the things that makes games like this fun, a chance to, just see a little bit more about what the rest of this roster looks like, young guys who perhaps up until now haven't gotten a chance to play very much.
And in the case that does happen, BA, other than Brock Vandagriff and a Gunnar Stockton, if we do see the young guys get real-time game experience today, who would you like to see more of?
Well, obviously last week we got a little bit of a taste of a couple of young tight ends. Lawson Lucky's been battling injury. He got a chance to get in the game. Pierce Berlin, I guess, kind of in that same boat. So that's certainly interesting. I think that Georgia's also in kind of a situation right now where it's still rotating some along its offensive line, trying to figure out what its best five is, as we believe that Amarius Mims is getting ready to come back from injury. So that will continue to be worth watching. And I'll tell you one more spot to kind of keep in mind here. You know, the inside linebacker position has had the spotlight with a lot of fans here this year, and perhaps sometimes not exactly for the right reasons. Javon Dumas-Johnson, though, answered his critics last week with a much better game. He had a sack and a half, and was a big part of why Georgia was so successful. So I would look at the inside linebacker position here today in terms of how much do you see of guys who have been playing, such as Raylan Wilson, and we would continue to hear, you know, really good things about. Obviously, we've seen C.J. Allen and what he's been able to do, and you start to wonder, well, how much could these young linebackers be a part of maybe what Georgia does with its rotational pieces as you move to the stretch run of the season? Seeing what happens there at inside linebacker, I do think could be really interesting of how much of the young guys making a push to really force this defensive coaching staff to play them, even though you've got a couple of veteran guys, including who I mentioned before, Javon Dumas-Johnson, who are your sort of listed starters.
And Brandon, one thing that you do such a phenomenal job of is filming our Kroger dog walk, which you will get the opportunity to see later in the show. But I want you to tell me, when you saw the guys getting off the bus, going through the walk, what emotions or what sort of read could you get off of the players or the coaches?
You know, they were pretty relaxed today for the most part. There was a good number of Georgia fans, but it wasn't as festive, obviously, as it might be for one of these at home. I thought it was interesting. You know, that's a Freudian slip. Carson Beck has had some pretty outlandish fashion choices for the most part this year with the dog walks. He's worn some very impressive suits today, obviously sharply dressed there as well, but much more understated. It was completely dark, you know, kind of a monochromatic black on black type thing. So I don't know if that speaks to a more business-like version of him or if that speaks to kind of going dark mode for today's game. I guess I'll let people decide that for themselves, but a little bit of a different fashion look from Beck today. I thought Tate Ratledge knocked out of the park, though. Very nice, well-fitting suit, but also a couple of a nice pair of really cool boots to go along with that, which is sort of what you'd expect for Ratledge to have. The interesting contrast between the tailored suit and the cowboy-style boots here in Music City was quite a look from Ratledge, so I really enjoyed the chance to see that. So the team was pretty relaxed in terms of how they walked in, clearly seemed focused on the task at hand, and a few of the guys took the moment to kind of show off some pretty nice fashion sense there as well.
Well, at least we know if being a host doesn't work out for you, Brandon, a job at Men's Warehouse or a judge on Project Runway might serve you right. Now, the last thing I have...
One of these days, I feel like one of these days I can be like, like Oscar's red carpet or something like that. I feel like that maybe I missed my calling on that.
I would love to host the Oscars red carpet with you. But last thing, I'm going to let you go. What is your final thought here? If you could leave the audience with one thing to know about the game against Vanderbilt, what would it be, B.A.?
It would be simply this, that no matter what happens, no matter how dominant the Georgia victory is, we will be talking about it with folks after the game on our DawgNation postgame show right here from the field. So good chance to react to everything we see. What we hope is another great game for Brock Bowers, continuing a stretch of 3 consecutive 100-yard receiving games for him, and so much more. So whatever the action foretells for today, we'll be talking about on the postgame show when it's all said and done.
All right, well, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to see your video later of the Kroger dog walk. Brandon Adams does such a wonderful job with that, but now we're going to move to Kaylee's Keys. I'm going to make this really, really, really quick because I actually don't have very much to say about it. I really think that the slide speaks for itself here, so let's go ahead and take a look at Kaylee's Keys. If you can tell me where that first bullet point comes from, I'm going to have the biggest smile on my face. It happens every single day, Monday through Friday. All the dogs need to do today is show up on time and do the work that is promised. The first person that can tell me that in the comments, I'm going to come up with a prize for you because it should not be that difficult if you watch a specific show every single day. In my opinion, all the dogs needed to do today was actually get to the game, show up. I don't see it going any other way. So show up on time and do the work that's promised. And for the love of all things good, please do not pull a Colorado like what we saw last night. I mean, Colorado expected to put up big wins. Stanford had the largest comeback in their school's history. And gosh, it was so, so, so sad to watch. And I kind of feel like what Stanford is to the Pac-12 is what Vanderbilt is to the SEC, like the lone wolf, prestigious, smarty pants school. So I just don't want to see a team like Vanderbilt do the same thing that Stanford did last night. So as long as we can show up on time and do the work that's promised and not make a huge, big old mistake like Colorado last night, we are going to be just fine, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to leave my Kaylee's keys at that. And we will give y'all some more moving forward. Now it is time to take a look at our injury report brought to you by J. Stein Law Firm. Injuries. It was the primary focus of our show for the first third of the season. It was all injury, injury, injury. Nobody could get better. More people were getting hurt. And finally, it seems like we're coming to a point where the injuries are getting less and less. And the people that are out are starting to recover. And we saw Cedric Van Pran go down last week. He ended up returning for the second half. You could kind of feel the mood in the stadium shift a little bit, because when you have a guy like Cedric Van Pran, a guy that chose to come back on his own when he could have gone to the NFL, a leader on the team, the center, it's a really big deal. And so to see him come back in the second half last week like he did was just a big breath of fresh air for all of us that were in Sanford Stadium. Now, the big one that's going on right now is Amarius Mims, and then as Brandon mentioned, we did get to see a little bit of Lawson Lucky last week, but he's not back at full health. Those are the two big ones that we are missing out on right now. But Kirby was asked about this as well in his press conference Monday on the status of, will Amarius be back in time for the Florida game? What's the status of Lawson Lucky? Here's what Kirby had to say about Mims and Lucky.
No go. It's really about where he is. I mean, the timeline for Lucky would put him around there, but he's not. He may not be the exact same as Lawson. I mean, Lawson's is a skill position that requires more cutting and things like that. We've ordered a special shoe for Amarius and plan to use it. We use that with Andrew Thomas and several other kids on the offensive line that have had ankle injuries. But we don't put a timeline on it just for that reason, that it could be before, it could be after. It's based on his progression of how he feels when he starts moving around and what he does.
And that was Kirby on the status of Amarius Mims and Lawson Lucky. So still up in the air on if we're going to get Mims back for Florida or not. Not sure exactly what that tightrope surgery looks like, but it does look like we're going to be getting Lawson Lucky back, hopefully full-time for the Florida game. And gosh, if we get him back, that is just another major tight end to add to that group already. That, of course, sees Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp, who is improving each and every game. I think he has 2 touchdowns on the year already. He's really impressed me, somebody that I got to see in high school who is now on the collegiate field and excelling. And Lawson Lucky is just another weapon that we can add to that room. So looking forward to potentially seeing them back. The good thing about the bye week is that it really gives these players time to rest so they can come back for that second half of the season that is so crucial and so important. So that was Kirby on the status of them. Now, of course, our injury report is always brought to you by J. Stein Law Firm. If you or a loved one has been injured because somebody else did something wrong, look no further than our friends at J. Stein Law Firm. Not only is Josh Stein a double dog graduating from UGA Law School, he has over 20 years of experience handling injury cases. You're going to get the small firm attention, service, and compassion that you deserve. They have limited caseloads, so every client receives the time needed on every case. So when the time comes and you are in need, reach out to a fellow dog to get the service that you deserve. Josh and his team are local, so when you are in need, visit them online at jsteinlawfirm.com. That's jsteinlawfirm.com. And that is our injury report brought to you by J. Stein Law Firm. All right, this is everybody's favorite point in the show, and I'm not the only person that said this. Carvel also said this morning in the studio, so I know it has to be true because Carvel's like the internet. Everything that he says is right. So I know you guys are excited about our Centel's Intel recruiting report. We had a lot to say yesterday on our call with him. So let's hear what Jeff had to say about the recruiting weekend that is here today. Everybody's favorite man, Jeff Centel, here to give us his wonderful intel as always. I've got to start with, is there any update on the skeleton? How has it been?
It's pretty good. I tell you what's funny. We need to put that on Before the Hedges because it's pretty cool. So we didn't get vandalized by any Florida fans or Alabama fans. The weather's holding up. His DawgNation polo did not get taken. But one thing that's crazy, and we got to put some staffing on this weekend, is Blind Eddie his bandana, his red bandana got blown off. I guess weather blew his red bandana. So I guess Blind Eddie can see right now, if a blind skeleton can see. But the rest of it's holding up pretty good. Some people have sent me some pictures. I encourage anybody, take a picture, send it, tag DawgNation, tag me on social media, and we'll retweet it. If you go by Woodstock, you go by that little corner, you got, I guess we're going to call him Bartholomew Adams, or maybe.
Yeah, that was my next question is, did we come up with a name?
Yeah. I like Brando Adams just because it's kind of like clever. You take the N off of Brandon, but like our skeleton, our guy is hanging in there through rain, sleet, snow, and potentially bye weeks and drubbings of Vanderbilt and drubbings of Kentucky. It's been a hit so far.
Well, this week we've had a lot going on in the recruiting world of UGA, starting with the commitment of Bo Walker. I've had the chance to see him. Cedar Grove breeds some hard-nosed kids. How big is that commitment for the Dogs?
First of all, isn't it the best running back name ever? I mean,
awesome.
You can't be a fullback with the name Bo Walker. No relation, of course, but like Cedar Grove, people don't understand. Cedar Grove is happy to go 1-3 or 1-4 because they're going to play 7A Collins Hill, 7A Colquitt County. And then when it's time for them to feast on 3A, they just roll through folks. And Bo Walker's been a part of that program for years. Cedar Grove's been very good to Georgia recently, Christian Miller, CJ Madden, and it pumps out a lot of players. And one of the things I got some feedback was like, hey, and I hate it how it is, Kaylee, but they go unrated, no stars, no rankings. It's just what it is. I mean, first of all, Georgia is taking 3 megawatt studs for their 2024 class. When you load up on 3 running backs, it's going to be very hard to go back and get a lot of great guys, especially 3 All-American tailbacks. Running back types, it's going to be hard to get those 4 and 5 stars anyway. And the next class, especially since NIL, the biggest recruits now want a lot of money. The 5-star running backs want a lot of money because they see running back as not a longevity position and they got to get their cash now. And Bo's a guy that, he had offers from Ole Miss, Arkansas, Georgia. He told me his dream school, when I first saw him and I said, that guy's going to be a dude as a freshman. And he told me his dream school is always Florida State. And Georgia had kind of been trending for Bo Walker a lot here. He's a 3-down back. He plays baseball. He's a center fielder. Sorry, Braves fans, if you got a little pain in the gut. Fred Sanford still. Can't mention the Braves, but he's a great center fielder. He's got a great arm. He's a great athlete. That's why he tracks the ball so well in center. He can be a great guy, slot receiver. I think that's a good type of fit for Georgia, and he's loved Georgia for a long time. And listen, if we're going to trust anybody when it comes to recruiting his position by now, you should put in Dell McGee you trust when it comes to running backs, especially an in-state running back.
Well, tomorrow, aside from the Georgia-Vanderbilt game, we do have some big news on the recruiting horizon. Aiden Breeland, who's consistently been on that top targets list, is going to make his decision tomorrow. What do you know about that? And how different is it the fact that he's committing on a Saturday while college football is going on?
Yeah, first of all, some people you and I know very well were like, I'm not going to take a commitment from anybody that's going to commit in the middle of a fall Saturday. That's like a wedding in the fall. Like, what are you doing? And I know how much you love music, Kaylee. So like, if we had a soundtrack to describe the Aiden Breeland recruitment from a Georgia fan's perspective, I would probably go back to the Aaliyah Classic Back and Forth.
Wow.
Because Georgia was in a good spot, then they weren't, and then they got a late visit, and then they were in a good spot. But this is one of those things, Georgia, Oregon, and I think it's a matter – well, these are 2 very good programs. Let's not pretend that Oregon is Missouri here. But, I think NIL is going to be a part of this. And you see one program that's probably going to do a lot more with NIL at the forefront for a high school player in Oregon than maybe the Dogs would do. So – I think this is one of those things. I don't know. Dog fans should be geared up for this one in the middle of high-fiving after Georgia scores its 6th or 7th touchdown against Vanderbilt, or just watching the highlights later on in the day. He's supposed to make his decision in the afternoon, I think kind of right when Oregon is playing Washington in a huge game. And I think that's something to watch for. I think Georgia's in it. I think it's Georgia and Oregon has went back and forth, but a lot of the tea leaves right now say it's not going to be we're going to see a duck tweet from Dan Lanning and not that Go Dogs tweet from Kirby Smart on Saturday.
Now, obviously, we head on the road tomorrow, so it's not one big recruiting hotspot like it was last weekend at Kentucky. And speaking of Kentucky, I do want to know, do you have any updates on the visitors list from last weekend? How did that go?
Yeah, a lot of things went really well. I think still talking to a lot of them, putting stories up on DawgNation.com. But Marcellus Barnes was a Virginia Tech commit Georgia had there. He's a 3-star corner. Of course, he can run. Otherwise, Fran Brown wouldn't be recruiting him. Nazir Johnson out of Dublin. Reports are coming to me that he is already going to set his official to Georgia for November the 11th. And that's a guy that's currently committed to Florida. I know it would pain a lot of our viewers to have to raise a glass to Georgia flipping another Gator commitment to the good guys, so to speak. And, you've also got Terrell Anderson, the NC State wide receiver commit. Another potential flip there because his family grew up Dog fans. His high school teammate is Jamal Jarrett. And let's just face it, at some points, college football food chain, when you get Georgia in a battle for a player with NC State, might like those chances there a little bit with that head-to-head. But those are the 2024s. I know everybody's like, tell us about the 2024s because people don't want to focus on a lot. But I think Kaylee, the 2025 class for Georgia got a lot stouter, a lot more roots were placed. I thought it was a phenomenal visit, perhaps maybe even a recruitment-defining visit for David Sanders Jr. We featured him on Before the Hedges this week, and they just got the most stinking cute family imaginable with his younger sisters. They call him Bra. They don't even know how good he is. They just know that they go to a lot of football games. I think Amari Williams, the son of Mo Williams, was there. That was another big visit. Georgia's trying to flip Ryan Williams, a wide receiver, away from Alabama. Georgia's trying to flip Mason Short, an offensive lineman out of Evans High School in Augusta, Georgia, or the Augusta metro area. So the Dogs were putting in some work last weekend, where this weekend, obviously it's Vanderbilt. They might have 30 recruits among the 28,000 people that are going to be there.
You mentioned David Sanders Jr. That was one of my favorite videos that we've had on Before the Hedges so far. What a terrific kid. I got to meet him at the Under Armour All-American camp, and those sisters, man, I would probably have to listen to where they tell me to go because you can tell who makes the decisions in that household. But you can just tell such a great player, not on the field, but off the field as well. So well-spoken, and I'm glad that we got the chance to hear him on Before the Hedges this week. Now let's turn to bye week next week because we're not going to have a pregame show. We're not going to have that super awesome intel that we get every weekend. So I want to know, what does recruiting look like during the bye week? Because I know for UGA football recruiting, it never stops, but I imagine that when we do have that Saturday off, it is recruiting all week. What do you know about it?
Yeah, I think you're going to see Kirby's going to take one amazing visit to either, might be to LJ McCray down in, since obviously LJ's made his commitment decision now for October 21st. It's coming up very, very soon. Another guy that's going to make his decision on the 21st on a Saturday. I mean, he's got a bye week, at least for Georgia fans. But I think he's going to make one splash visit or maybe he might just go Kirby copter and catch like 3 or 4 guys in the metro area or something like that. He could, ideally, if he wanted to, I think you'll see Dogs coaches on the road. I would imagine they're going to be a Bulldog coach there in Texas for 2 Georgia 5-star commits and Joseph Jonah Ajanye and Justin Williams. First of all, shout out to Justin Williams. I don't know if I've covered too many linebackers that have 3 straight pick sixes in 3 straight weeks, but Justin got one of those in his Thursday game earlier this week. So you're going to see, I would imagine Hartley might be with Jaden Riddell for his game. You're going to see a lot of the assistants go see their kind of prized recruits. Fran Brown will probably be down at IMG to see Ellis Robinson IV. That's what it looks like for a lot of them. You're also going to see Georgia's coaches on the road on like Thursday, maybe like trying to just touch in and reinforce a lot of their commitments on a Thursday practice, stop by high schools on Thursday and Friday, because those are going to be work days for Georgia. Don't get that wrong. That's going to be work day for Georgia. And that's going to be a chance for them to really get out on the road because so much of their season now is immersed on preparation for being the number 1 program in the land.
And we won't touch on Georgia, Florida too much, but we're going to tease it just a little bit. It is technically considered a neutral site game. That can be argued among some, but how does that work in terms of recruiting? Because it is neutral site, there's not really a home team. How does that make the recruiting visits different for that particular game?
Yeah, there's really not. There's no interaction, but what you can do, sometimes Georgia and Florida agree on it, sometimes they don't, is you can leave tickets for recruits, but there's not a central area where like recruits will be at where like after the game, the players can't come jump in the end zone. I think one of my favorite parts of the Georgia-Florida game is, the Dogs always, after the win, and they've won a lot of Florida games recently, they just make it a habit. Like it's almost a bucket list thing for the season. They go find the dog fans in the dog corner of the end zone, and they go jump in that end zone, and they act like it is just the greatest thing in the world. Their version of the Lambeau Leap, they're doing it on the banks of the St. Johns River in Jacksonville, and that's really one of those great moments where you can interact with the fans. I mean, let's face it, this is University of Georgia we cover. Nobody's storming the field after a win. You really don't see that. Great to be here. Thank you. Like Kirby Smart is now, he always acknowledges them. Sometimes he takes his lap. That's one of the rare times when you'll see Kirby make a lap around the stadium after a win. That's because Georgia has gotten so good so fast. And it's also because he knows how hard it is to win in Jacksonville. So everyone he can get as a coach to kind of replace some of that pain he had as a player, he's going to take advantage of.
Well, Jeff, I'm going to let you have your final word here. It could be about Georgia Vanderbilt. It can be something regarding the big decisions coming up on Saturday or the bye week. Leave us with that intel final thought that's going to linger for the next couple of days.
So I'm going to prepare you guys. I expect this next month there are going to be some decommitments. There are going to be some guys that we've wrote about, we've talked about. You're going to lose some guys. But I also expect Georgia to upgrade a lot of those positions with some key talent. Like there's really 4 or 5 names. It's funny, Kaylee, on our Before the Hedges top targets list this week, that thing had been down to bare bones, like our skeleton maybe at the Woodstock downtown celebration, where 3 names, 2 names or whatever. I think Aiden Breeland's going to come off this week, regardless if it's Georgia or Oregon. You're going to see L.J. McCray. You're going to see Michael Barreau. But now Terrell Anderson we mentioned, Nazir Johnson we mentioned, and also Marcellus Bryant we mentioned. So there's going to be some late names. I actually like it, Kaylee. I like it when Georgia – I call it – Kirby Smart said this a couple of years ago, like senior evals are something that he really – everybody's in a hurry to get your guys and get your classes and get them done by June. But they also try to keep about 3 or 4 spots. Like look at last year. Kyron Jones, they went and got a player like that. Chris Peel, another guy. Like they get guys late. And usually what they do is they find a guy that I kind of refer to it as the senior grow-up pill. They have a senior moment where they just got a whole lot better. And it shows that the Dogs are still looking, trying to find the very best guys they can. And so anybody that Georgia adds now to this recruiting class, not only are they going to hit everything they need, they're going to be a good fit, but also they've progressed a great deal to where Georgia jumped on them late, kind of like a Terrell Anderson, kind of like a Marcellus Bryant. And it's not just always because they missed on a Nikar, they missed on another guy, they had a guy decommitment. In a lot of cases, they find kind of hidden gems. I mean, probably the all-time hidden gem we'll always talk about is Lad McConkey, who got an offer from Georgia in early January of basketball season and then ended up committing to the Dogs and signing with the Dogs in February and going on to a really bedrock career in Athens.
Well, as always, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to seeing those awesome pictures that you take in Vanderbilt and another photo tour.
Yeah, there might be some 2 stars and some 1 stars and some no stars in the Vanderbilt recruiting section. But I'm tell you what, here's another teaser. We're taking a lot of pictures of like Tate Ratledge and Xavier Trust hosting a guy or Brock Bowers up in the end zone because love this stat. I don't think Vanderbilt has scored a touchdown on Georgia in the last 5 years. Woo!
Well, I don't see that changing anytime soon. And as always, thank you.
Thanks, Kaylee.
And that was everybody's favorite person, Jeff Sentell. Now, we have Mike Griffith waiting on the phone, but before we bring him on, I do want to address something I saw in the comments. Somebody asked, what happened to my Brock Bowers jersey? So we pre-record Jeff's segment, and because Jeff is a very busy man, and I know you guys see that same old, boring, gross, plain background from my living room every week, but I'm going to let you guys know next week things are going to be a little bit different. I've upgraded my home office, so big things on the horizon for our pre-record with Jeff. not next week. It's the bye week when we come back for Florida. So big things then. Now it's time to bring on our DawgNation reporter, Mike Griffith, who is in Nashville. He went last night. Mike, so awesome to have you. I do want to start with a question that I also gave to Brandon, and that is that last week it finally seems like we met the standard that UGA fans expect to see out of the team. I imagine we'll keep that same standard today. But from your perspective, would you like to see a completely dominant performance for all 4 quarters, or would you rather us run up the score in the first half and get a chance to see some of our talented younger guys in the second?
Why not do both? Why not put your talented young guys and keep running up the score? I mean, Georgia has a lot more talented players than Vanderbilt, and the last 2 years have been evidence that you can substitute and still play up to the standard and still execute. I know that's what Kirby Smart's looking for.
And one thing that we have to keep note of is the game day atmosphere at Vanderbilt is already so different. It's definitely a lot different this year considering all of the renovations that are going on, all of the construction. Can the atmosphere have an impact on the game itself, Mike?
Well, I suppose it can, but on the road, you're almost better off when it doesn't, right, Kaylee?
Mm-hmm.
So, if anything, it should help Georgia that there's not a hostile crowd here. It should actually give Georgia the opportunity to communicate more effectively. 28,000 seats, I would say. I'm guessing we'll see no less than 20,000 Dog fans here would be my guess. So, it's a unique atmosphere in the sense that it's only 28,000 fans, and you're coming off a game like I wrote about on DawgNation.com this morning where you had 92,000 under the lights against an undefeated Kentucky team, and now you're playing a Vanderbilt team that's lost 5 in a row on the road in front of 28,000. So I don't know that I guess my thought is that just the atmosphere won't have as much to do with the game as maybe it typically does at a SEC home game under the lights or a hostile crowd on the road.
Every week I release my impact players, and one of my impact players for this week was Raw Thomas. And last week, Mike, you called it. You have a gift, sir. You said that you thought that one of our transfers was going to have an outstanding game. And last week we really saw the emergence of Raw Thomas. He had that awesome touchdown that first second. We didn't know it was a touchdown or what, but it's been all over social media this week. Do you just see that as the start for Raw Thomas, or maybe are you expecting a big game from Dominic Levitt today? Where do you think our transfers stand in today's game?
Well, I think you nailed it, at the start of the show. We don't know how long the starters are going to be in and how many young players are going to get opportunities today and when Kirby will substitute. I think you got to look at Kendall Milton as your potential impact player. He's been named a team captain, I think, for the first time. He declared himself back last week. He played 18 snaps, but I guess they were pretty good snaps because he says he's back. And the fact that he's a team captain would suggest to me that the coaches are looking for some leadership and, potentially impact from him today. So that's my pick for impact player of the day. Today would be Kendall Milton.
And since you are one of our Athens residents, you get the opportunity to attend the press conferences held all week long. And earlier in this show, I gave an audio clip of what Kirby was saying about Ken Seals coming in as quarterback, the wide receiver group at Vanderbilt. Based on what you heard and listened to this week, what have the Dogs had to say about Vanderbilt? What is the approach for today's game?
They make it about themselves. They really don't make it about opponents typically, and Vanderbilt's really no different in that sense. Unless there's a marquee star, Kirby doesn't really go too far out of his way to say much about the other team. So this is really more about Georgia, and really about Georgia having an opportunity to play some younger guys, build a little bit more depth, try to stay healthy going into that bye week before the stretch run, with Florida, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Tennessee still ahead.
Mm-hmm. We're at the point now where we come back from bye week and it is all gas, no brakes. It only gets more difficult from here. And one thing that we kind of talk about from week to week is what is the biggest thing that we need to see the Dogs do today as we head into bye week and then we get into the second half of our schedule? What do we need to establish today as a team?
Oh, I think, you want to see Carson Beck have another good outing. He cleaned up some mistakes. He threw a pretty bad interception in the second half, Kaylee, and that's kind of been the thing with Carson that's kept him out of the starting lineup and kept him behind Stetson Bennett and created pause, was that he has 2 or 3 lapses a game. And this is what Kirby says. I mean, I'm just telling you what the head coach has said over the years and what he said this year, that, Carson has 2 or 3 bad plays every game that they don't want, that they don't need, and Stetson did too, by the way. And, Kirby would call him out and call him boneheaded and all that. I feel like he's a lot more delicate with Carson, almost like, I don't know that Carson is quite as resilient. I don't know if anybody's as really resilient as Stetson Bennett for that matter, but Kirby's a lot more gentle in his criticism of Carson, it seems like. But he has made it clear that he wants to see Carson eliminate mistakes. So, my thought is you want to see, 3 really clean quarters from Carson. You want to see Brock Vandagriff get some snaps. You need to have a good insurance policy. Kirby and the coaches talked a lot about playing their backup quarterbacks, and they haven't really held their word. Brock Vandagriff's only had 38 snaps, and that's really not a lot. So maybe today, if history holds true, this will be an opportunity for Brock to get some snaps, get some work, because if anything happens to Carson, it's next man up. We saw that in 2021 when JT went down and Stetson stepped up and won a national title, and we've seen it happen. We saw it in 2017. The very beginning of the year, injury, Jake Fromm comes in, leads the team, helps lead the team to a national championship game appearance. Probably should have been a national title if, the defense executes properly. So it's been important in the past to have good execution, from your backup players. I don't think that's any different now.
Well, we recently at Auburn saw Ladd McConkey come back. He's been fighting a back injury all season long. Since he's been back, though, he's only had 5 receptions on the year, and this is a guy that the fans love. He's been clutch since he came into the program. Do you think that today we're going to see Ladd McConkey get the ball more, and maybe this is kind of his breakout game since coming back?
No, I don't think so, and I don't think you want it to be. I don't know why you would want to see Ladd McConkey catch many balls against Vanderbilt if this is a lopsided game. I think you want to make sure that he's healthy for the next game. I'm not sure what his status is going to be today. It's been touch and go and game time decisions. The nature of the injury kind of dictates that. I mean, it's a disc, and it takes time for these injuries to get better. And rest is really the only thing they can do. I mean, he's doing in practice what he can, and Kirby's talked about that, how they put him through some drills but not others. So I would say Ladd will be a game-time decision, and even if he was 100%, I don't think you'd want to take a whole lot of chances with Ladd McConkey today. I think you'd want to get him through this week with as much rest as possible. You've got a bye week next week. That's more rest. That's more time to get healthy. So if anything, I don't expect to see very much of Ladd at all today. And even if he's 100%, I think you just want to continue to give that back time to rest because, as you said, Kaylee, the back end of the schedule is more difficult, and it's going to be a lot more challenging than the first half. And I think you're going to want to have as Ladd McConkey as healthy as possible, to kind of do the sort of things he did last year when he had over 1,000 total offensive yards.
Well, based on the statistics and what we've seen from the Commodores this far, they are a passing attack team. They actually have really good passing statistics. So what do we need to see from the defense today, Mike?
Well, I would tell you that maybe part of the reason they pass the ball so much is they get so far behind, that's all they can do.
That's a good point.
They have to pass it. And teams are willing to give them passing yards underneath because they don't want to give up big plays. So I don't know that I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure that they're as good of a passing team as maybe the numbers would suggest. But to your point, what Georgia has to do is get in front, stay in front, and play smart football. Because the only chance Vanderbilt has, in my opinion, to keep this close would be if Georgia turns the ball over and helps them out. I just don't think Vanderbilt's a very good football team. Or very good football program, and clearly they just don't put a whole lot of priority on their football based on, the look and feel of their facilities.
And Mike, you always have really good insight. You put some great articles out. We know you have such a wide range of knowledge on this football program. And when you take a look at today's game, since your predictions always seem to turn out right, I want you to give me a starter that you expect to put up big numbers today and a younger guy that we could see make some big plays today as well.
That's interesting. You know, it's really hard. It's really hard to say how Kirby wants to play it, right? Because this is kind of a name your score, name your style of game, you know, kind of opportunity. I think maybe, you know, I mentioned Milton earlier. I think they're going to want to see Kendall do some things. I don't think they're going to overuse him. Maybe one of the younger, you know, maybe this is a Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint type of game. You know, I know they like to get him the ball when they can. And, you know, he's done really good things this season. He's been reliable and dependable. A younger player, maybe Oscar Delp.
Yeah.
You know, Delp has had some good moments. He's had some tough moments, too. He had a pretty costly fumble against Auburn that put the team, you know, in jeopardy. I know he made amends for that later with a touchdown catch. But I think maybe Oscar Delp would be a guy on that list that I would look at. Trying to think who else would be on that list among the younger players. It's too bad none of the younger backs are healthy. I mean, my goodness, if Andrew Paul was healthy, then I would put him on that list as well because I know they want to get him some work. Those would be the two guys that I would say probably Delp and Paul would be the two younger guys.
Now, you are our last line of defense here, Mike. We had Brandon first. We just have Jeff, and now we have you. I want you to give me your final thoughts on today's game. If you could let everybody at home watching know one thing about this game or even headed into the bye week, what would it be, Mike?
You guys already quoted the statistic about Vanderbilt not scoring since 2018 when they scored with 3 seconds left or something like that.
That is correct.
I guess I would look at the streaks, right? So you got a few streaks that are pretty pertinent. I think Brock Bowers, he has 3 straight 100-yard receiving games. I think if he's going to have a chance for the Heisman Trophy, then I think these are the kind of stats that people, you know, that resonate. Unfortunately, some people just do judge on stats. So I think maybe getting Brock Bowers 100 yards today, if you're interested in him having a Heisman campaign, numbers talk. I would say, you know, this would be Georgia's, I believe, 23rd consecutive SEC win, which would put them one away from tying Steve Spurrier and what he did at Florida between 1994 and 1997. So those are the two streaks that I look for Georgia to continue today that are pretty relevant.
Mike, I do actually want to ask you one more thing, super quick. We have our event this Wednesday coming up with Mark Richt. We are going to be bowling for a absolutely wonderful cause. Mike, I imagine that you might be a pretty good bowler, so I want you to give me what you think that you were going to bowl in round one. Do you think it's going to be over 100 or under 100?
Well, I don't know that I'll be bowling. But
oh, come on!
I bowled, I was pretty disappointed in my last bowling effort. I was barely, and there was a time when I bowled. In college, I bowled in a league for a year. It was pretty fun with my dad, which was really one of the best things I did. As you know, I know you're close to your dad, and the time you can spend with your parents is invaluable, especially as you grow older and you think back to those great memories that you have. And I actually bowled about a 238 one time. That might be my highest, but I don't think I'll see 200 again for quite some time. If I were to roll and try to really focus, my goal would be to roll a 150. That'd be my goal.
Well, you need to put your money where your mouth is. I'm going to see you in the lanes on Wednesday. I'm not going to take no for an answer.
Well, I hope we have the time. It's going to be a pretty exciting event. I mean, it's pretty cool that I know that Jittery Joe's is going to have some representatives there. I know that DawgNation has a lane, and it's all for such a great cause with the research with Crohn's disease and Parkinson's. And I think Kirby Smart and his family are going to be there. Of course, it's a private event, but you know, you'll be able to see that streamed live on DawgNation.com on Wednesday night, and Brandon Adams will be emceeing that, and you'll get to see Brandon interview a lot of the players in addition to Coach Richt, and I think David Pollock's going to be there and David Green. So folks need to put that on their calendar for Wednesday night at 6:30 to see Brandon Adams MC that event there and see a lot of these Georgia football players rolling and bowling.
All right, Mike. Well, I will let you go. I know you have work to do. Go ahead and start stretching those wrists out because Wednesday is coming up soon. Thank you, Mike.
All right, Kaylee. Thank you.
And that was our DawgNation reporter, Mike Griffith, who I will force to bowl on Wednesday night, and I will update you guys on the score of it. I imagine he falls somewhere in the middle of us. But as our DawgNation Game Day show comes to a close, of course, I want to give a shout out to Jittery Joe's. Even though we are not there on location today, I am there in spirit. I drink their coffee every morning, so I guess I always have a little part of Jittery Joe's with me. It's an early game day for the Dogs. If you're in Athens, you still have time to go to one of their 13 locations and get you a coffee. I promise it's going to make all the difference in the world for what might not be the most exciting game on our schedule, but take advantage of an early kickoff. There's tons of great college football games going on today. I know there was a few people in the comments saying that they were exhausted this morning, so go grab you a Jittery Joe's coffee, and we will be back there for our next home game. Guys, we are getting closer and closer to kickoff. Just think about all the exciting plays that can happen today. And this is our last time playing Vanderbilt annually, so I think it's something to really be celebrated. One last time taking a trip to the Music City every single year. What a great location for all of you that got the chance to go up there today. Take your pictures, tag DawgNation in them. We want to see what you guys are doing up there, and make sure to say hello to Brandon, Jeff, and Mike. And as always, we are going to have Brandon's post-game show directly after the game, so you can tune back into all of our social media channels to see what the DawgNation staff is saying about the game. And of course, you guys have the opportunity to call in on Zoom, give your thoughts on the game. But I do want to leave you with this, that this game is about opportunity, not just opportunity for the younger guys, but an opportunity to see our offense continue to excel. Last week was the breakthrough game that we had all been waiting on. We kept feeling like we were waiting on the season to start, and last week gave us that dominant performance that reminded us of the wins that we had felt in 2021 and 2022. And so I want you guys to think about the possibilities of today and the big plays that we get to see everybody make, because it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And from here on out, our schedule only gets better and better. So enjoy today. Kickoff is coming up very shortly. Make sure to tag us in your pictures. Tune in for the post-game show and enjoy your Saturday of some absolutely wonderful college football games. Now go get your pregame in. Kickoff is coming up shortly, so I will see you guys soon. And as always, go Dogs.